The CEO stood frozen inside the broken elevator, her billion-dollar empire crumbling around her while the single father on the other side of the door held the only tool that could save her life. But saving her meant destroying his own. One choice, 10 seconds. Everything about to collapse. If you want to know how a man who couldn't afford next month's rent ended up holding the fate of Seattle's most feared billionaire in his hands, stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The hydraulic cable snapped at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Ethan Ryder knew immediately that someone was about to die. He was 3 floors below the executive level when the emergency radio crackled against his hip, dispatch screaming something about the penthouse elevator losing power during a board meeting. Ethan was already running before the message finished. His toolbox banged against his leg as he took the stairs 2 at a time, boots hammering against concrete, breath tearing through his chest. 7 years as an elevator technician had taught him one absolute truth. When the system failed this high up, gravity didn't negotiate. The emergency lighting painted everything the color of blood. Ethan hit the top floor and immediately heard it. The grinding metallic scream of a car struggling against failing brakes, someone inside pounding against the doors. How many people? He shouted into his radio. One man. The CEO Suman. Ethan's stomach dropped. Victoria Vale. He'd never met her, but everyone in Seattle knew the name. The woman who inherited Vale Dynamics at 25 and turned it into a tech empire worth $8 billion. The same woman whose building manager had ignored Ethan's safety reports for 6 months because fixing the executive elevator system would have cost too much money. Now someone was paying for that choice. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the elevator shaft access panel, fingers already working the bolts. The pounding from inside the car was getting weaker. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he called through the crack. A woman's voice came back, sharp despite the fear underneath. "The door won't open." "I know, don't touch anything. I'm getting you out." "How long?" Ethan looked at the control panel. The backup power system was fried. The manual override was jammed. The cable holding the car was fraying with every second that passed. 10 minutes, he lied. "I don't have 10 minutes. This company has a shareholder meeting in 2 hours and I need to be in that room." Ethan almost laughed. He was trying to save her life and she was worried about a meeting. "Lady, your elevator is hanging by a thread. Your shareholders can wait." "You don't understand. If I'm not in that meeting, I lose everything." Something in her voice made him stop. It wasn't arrogance, it was terror. Ethan yanked the panel open and stared at the mess of wiring inside. Whoever installed this system had cut corners everywhere. Half the safety mechanisms weren't even connected. The other half were held together with electrical tape and hope. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "What?" "Nothing. Just stay calm." "No." He pulled out his voltage tester and started tracing the power line. If he could bypass the safety lockout, he might be able to manually lower the car to the nearest floor. But the cable was already damaged. Too much weight, too much movement, and the whole thing would snap. The woman inside must have heard something in his silence. "It's bad, isn't it?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He was thinking about Mia. His daughter was home alone right now, waiting for him to finish this shift so he could pick her up from the neighbor's apartment. She was 7 years old, too young to understand why her dad sometimes came home late, why they ate pasta 4 nights a week, why her school pictures this year came from the discount package instead of the nice one. If this cable snapped while Ethan was working on it, Mia would wake up tomorrow without a father. But if he walked away, someone else's kid would wake up without a mother. "It's bad," he finally said, "but I've seen worse." Another lie. He grabbed the manual override crank and started working. The mechanism fought him every inch. Sweat ran down his back. His shoulders screamed. The cable groaned like a dying animal. "What's your name?" the woman asked suddenly. "Ethan?" "Victoria, Bob." "I know." "Right. Of course you do." Her voice was different now, quieter. "Ethan, if this doesn't work, it's going to work. But if it doesn't, I need you to tell someone something. You can tell them yourself in about 5 minutes. There's a lawyer named Patricia Chen. She works on 5th Avenue. Tell her the files are in the safe behind the Rothko painting in my office. She'll know what to do." Ethan stopped cranking. What files? Evidence. Against people who've been stealing from this company since my father died. If I don't make it to that meeting, they'll destroy everything before anyone can stop them. So this isn't just about missing a meeting. No. Ethan looked at the fraying cable, looked at the control panel, did the math in his head one more time. Then he made a decision that would change everything. Okay, he said, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to get you out of there, but when I do, you're going to listen to every single thing I tell you about what's wrong with this building, and you're going to fix it. Deal. Ethan positioned himself at the manual crank and pulled with everything he had. The cable screamed. The car dropped 3 inches, and his heart stopped. Then it caught. He cranked again. Slower this time. The car lowered 1 inch, 2 inches, 6 inches. Keep talking to me, he said through gritted teeth. I need to know you're okay in there. I'm fine. What do you want me to talk about? I don't care. Anything. There was a pause. Then, I haven't spoken to my mother in 4 years. She lives in San Diego, and I don't even know if she knows my father died. I kept meaning to call, but I never did. And now if I die in this elevator, that's it. She'll find out from the news. Ethan kept cranking. You're not dying in this elevator. But how do you know? Because I have a daughter who's waiting for me to come home. And I promised her I'd be there to help with her homework. So if you die, I don't get paid for this shift. And if I don't get paid, I can't afford the tutor she needs for math. So you're living through this whether you like it or not. Victoria actually laughed. It was a broken sound, but it was real. That's the worst motivational speech I've ever heard. Yeah, well, I'm an elevator guy, not a therapist. The car dropped another foot. Then another. Ethan's arms felt like they were going to tear off. And then, finally, the car settled level with the floor. Ethan released the manual override and grabbed the door release tool. The mechanism was still jammed, but he forced it, metal shrieking against metal until the doors finally opened. Victoria Vale nearly fell into the hallway. She was younger than he expected, maybe 30. Blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. A gray suit that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. Her hands were shaking, but her face was composed, like she'd already decided she wasn't going to show weakness, even if she'd just stared death in the face. Thank you, she said. Ethan nodded. He was already mentally writing the incident report, calculating how many code violations he'd have to document, wondering if this building manager would actually listen this time or just bury the paperwork again. Victoria straightened her jacket, checked her watch. I need to get to that meeting. No. She looked at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. Excuse me? Yeah. You can't use any of the elevators in this building until a full safety inspection is completed. That includes the executive elevator you were just trapped in. Actually, especially that one. I don't have time for, lady, I just risked my life pulling you out of a death trap. The least you can do is not immediately climb back into another one. Her jaw tightened. I'm not climbing into anything. I'm taking the stairs. 42 floors in heels? I've done harder things. She turned to leave. Ethan grabbed his toolbox and followed her. He didn't know why. Maybe because he wanted to make sure she actually made it to wherever she was going. Maybe because he knew the moment she walked into that meeting, his safety report would end up in a shredder somewhere. They hit the stairwell together. Victoria moved fast, her heels clicking against concrete like gunshots. Ethan stayed a few steps behind, watching her grip the railing a little too tight, the way her breathing hitched every few floors. You okay? He asked. Fine. She wasn't fine, but she was also the kind of person who would walk through fire before admitting she needed help. They made it down 6 floors before she stopped and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Take a minute, Ethan said. I don't have a minute. Then take 30 seconds. She glared at him, but she didn't move. Ethan set his toolbox down and waited. The stairwell was cold and the lighting was harsh. Victoria looked smaller here, away from the polished hallways and expensive art. Why do you care? She asked suddenly. About what? Whether I make it to this meeting. You don't even know me. Ethan shrugged. I don't know most people I help. That's kind of how the job works. Most people don't risk their lives for strangers. Most people don't have a choice. He picked up his toolbox. Come on, you're wasting your 30 seconds. They kept going, down and down and down. Ethan's legs burned. Victoria was limping now, but she refused to slow down. By the time they hit the 20th floor, she'd taken off her heels and was walking barefoot on concrete that was probably filthy. "You know this is insane, right?" Ethan said. "What? Whatever's in that meeting, it can't be worth destroying your feet." "It's worth more than you understand. Try me." Victoria stopped walking, turned to face him. For the first time since he'd pulled her out of that elevator, she looked actually vulnerable. "When my father died, he left me a company and a lot of enemies. People who think I'm too young, too female, too emotional to run $1 billion empire. They've been waiting for me to fail. And tonight, they're going to vote on whether to remove me as CEO and install someone else." "Who?" "My uncle, Richard Vale. He's convinced half the board that I'm destroying the company with reckless decisions, that I'm not stable enough to lead." "Are you?" Her expression went cold. "I've doubled this company's value in 5 years. I've launched 3 product lines that changed the industry. I've personally negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So yeah, I'm stable enough." Ethan held her gaze. "Then why are you so scared?" Victoria's mouth opened, closed. She looked away. "Because maybe they're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I never was, and I've just been lucky until now." Cortez. Ethan had heard that voice before. It sounded like every thought that ran through his head at 3 in the morning when he was staring at bills he couldn't pay, wondering if he was failing Mia by working a job that barely kept them above water. "Look," he said, "I don't know anything about running a company, but I know what it looks like when someone's trying their best, and the world keeps kicking them anyway. And I know that the people who show up, even when they're terrified, are usually the ones who deserve to be there." Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then she put her heels back on. "Let's go," she said. They made it to the conference level with 3 minutes to spare. The boardroom doors were closed, but Ethan could hear voices inside, angry and overlapping. Victoria straightened her jacket one more time, fixed her hair, became someone else right in front of him. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "Just doing my job." "No, you did a lot more than that." She reached for the door handle, then stopped. "The safety violations you mentioned, I want a full report on my desk by tomorrow morning. Every single issue in this building. I'll make sure they're fixed." Ethan nodded. "I'll get it done." Victoria pushed open the doors and walked into the boardroom like she owned the place, which, technically, she did. The voices inside went quiet. Ethan caught a glimpse of a long table surrounded by men in suits, all of them turning to stare at Victoria as she took her seat at the head. The doors closed. Ethan stood there for a minute, toolbox in hand, wondering what the hell just happened. Then his phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor. "Mia fell asleep on my couch. No rush picking her up." Ethan exhaled. At least something had gone right tonight. He took the stairs back down. There was no way he was using any elevator in this building, and found his truck in the parking garage. The engine coughed twice before turning over. The check engine light was on. Again. Ethan added it to the mental list of things he couldn't afford to fix. The drive home took 20 minutes. His apartment was in a building that made Victoria's corporate headquarters look like a palace. Peeling paint, broken security door, a landlord who cashed checks and ignored maintenance requests. But it was home. He picked up Mia from the neighbor's place. She was half asleep, her hair a mess, still wearing the unicorn pajamas he'd bought her last Christmas. She wrapped her arms around his neck and mumbled something about a dream she'd had. "Tell me in the morning, kiddo," Ethan whispered. He carried her up 2 flights of stairs and tucked her into bed. The apartment was quiet except for the radiator hissing in the corner. Ethan sat at the kitchen table and stared at the stack of bills he'd been avoiding all week. Electric, water, internet, rent, Mia's school tuition. He'd been juggling them for months, paying just enough to keep the lights on and the eviction notice at bay. But it was only a matter of time before something broke that he couldn't fix. His phone buzzed again, an email this time. From Victoria Vale. Subject, safety report. "Mr. Ryder, thank you again for your assistance tonight. I meant what I said about the safety report. Please include a detailed breakdown of all violations and an estimate for repairs. Additionally, I'd like to discuss a potential consulting contract. I'm overhauling our facilities management, and I need someone who actually understands these systems. If you're interested, call my assistant tomorrow to schedule a meeting. Best, Victoria Vale." Ethan read the email 3 times. A consulting contract with Veil Dynamics. That was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. Better pay, stable hours, maybe even enough to get ahead instead of constantly falling behind. But something about it felt wrong. People like Victoria Vale didn't hand out contracts to guys like him, not unless they wanted something in return. And Ethan had learned a long time ago that when something looked too good to be true, it usually was. He closed the email and went to bed. But he couldn't sleep. Instead, he lay there thinking about Victoria standing in that stairwell, admitting she was scared. Thinking about the way she'd walked into that boardroom like she was going to war. Thinking about the fact that in a city full of people who didn't know his name, she'd thanked him like she actually meant it. At 2 a.m, Mia wandered into his room, dragging her stuffed elephant behind her. "Dad? Yeah, baby? I had a bad dream." Ethan lifted the blanket. Mia climbed in beside him and curled up against his chest. She was getting too big for this, but he didn't care. These moments wouldn't last forever. "Want to tell me about it?" he asked. "We had to move away, and I couldn't bring Elephant." Ethan's throat tightened. That's not going to happen. Promise? He wanted to promise. He wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that they'd stay in this apartment forever, that she'd never have to worry about losing anything that mattered. But he'd learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. "I promise I'll do everything I can," he said instead. Mia was quiet for a minute. Then, "Your heart's beating really fast." "I'm just tired." "You're always tired." "Yeah, I know." She fell asleep before he did. Ethan lay there listening to her breathe, staring at the ceiling, making calculations that never added up to anything good. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse apartment he'd never see, Victoria Vale was probably doing the exact same thing. The next morning started the way every morning started. Too early and too loud. Mia's alarm went off at 6:30. Ethan dragged himself out of bed, made breakfast that was mostly cereal and optimism, and got her dressed for school. She talked the entire time about a project they were doing in art class, something about painting self-portraits. "I'm going to paint myself with a rocket ship," she announced. "Why a rocket ship?" "Because rockets are cool, and Miss Sanders said we could add anything we wanted." Ethan smiled despite the exhaustion. "Sounds perfect, Keith." He dropped her off at school and watched her run toward the building, backpack bouncing, already laughing with another kid about something Ethan couldn't hear. For 30 seconds, his life felt manageable. Then his phone rang. "Mr. Ryder, this is Amanda Chen, Victoria Vale's executive assistant. Ms. Vale asked me to schedule a meeting with you today if possible. Would 2 o'clock work?" Ethan looked at his calendar. He had 3 service calls scheduled and a maintenance inspection that couldn't be rescheduled. "Can we do 4 instead?" "I'll make it work. The meeting will be at Veil Dynamics headquarters. Just check in at the main desk and they'll direct you." She hung up before Ethan could change his mind. He spent the rest of the day trying not to think about it. Fixed a stuck door on the 6th floor of an office building. Replaced a worn pulley system in a residential tower. Wrote up a safety report for a building manager who'd probably ignore it. At 3:30, he drove to Veil Dynamics. The building looked different in daylight. Cleaner. More intimidating. Ethan parked in the visitor lot and walked through the main entrance, feeling completely out of place in his work boots and company jacket. The receptionist smiled at him like he was expected. "Mr. Ryder, Miss Vale is ready for you. Take the elevator to the 38th floor." Ethan almost laughed. "Any elevator but the executive one, right?" The receptionist's smile didn't falter. "Correct. Bus. Pochi. Well, he took the south elevator up. It ran smooth, no grinding, no hesitation. Of course it did. This was the elevator system for regular employees, the one that actually got maintained. The 38th floor was all glass and steel and uncomfortable modern furniture. Victoria's assistant met him at the elevator and led him through a maze of hallways to an office that had more square footage than Ethan's entire apartment. Victoria was on the phone when he walked in. She gestured for him to sit, finished her conversation in clipped professional sentences, and hung up. "You came," she said. "You asked." Most contractors would have sent an invoice and disappeared. "I'm not most contractors." Victoria almost smiled. "No, you're not." She slid a folder across the desk. Ethan opened it. Inside was a contract, 3 pages of legal language he'd need a lawyer to fully understand. "What is this?" A consulting position, 6 months, renewable. You'll audit every building Veil Dynamics owns or operates and bring them up to code. Full benefits, salary instead of hourly, and a signing bonus to start immediately. Ethan scanned the numbers, then scanned them again. The salary was more than he made in a year. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "Why not?" "Because you don't know me. I fixed one elevator. That doesn't mean I'm qualified to overhaul your entire operation." "Yarasokim, Waranis. You're right, you fixed one elevator. But you also told me the truth about what was wrong instead of covering it up to protect your company. And last night, you risked your career to make sure I understood how serious the safety violations were. That's not something most people do. Most people don't have a death wish, mate. Most people..." Victoria's expression hardened. "I'm offering you a job, Mr. Ryder, not a favor. If you're not interested, just say so." Wassamit. Ethan looked at the contract again, looked at the number that could solve every financial problem he had. "There's a catch," he said. "No, no catch." "There's always a catch," and Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Fine. You want the truth? I'm being investigated. The board thinks I'm mismanaging company resources. They're looking for any excuse to remove me. If I can show that I'm proactively fixing infrastructure problems, it makes me look responsible, competent, like someone who deserves to be CEO. So I'm a prop. You're an employee doing a job that actually needs to be done. Whether it also helps my image is irrelevant." Ethan closed the folder. "I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow morning." He stood up, started to leave, then turned back. "Why me?" he asked. "There are 100 contractors in this city. Why didn't you hire one of them?" Victoria met his eyes. "Because you're the only one who looked at me last night like I was a person instead of a paycheck." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He left the office, took the elevator back down, and sat in his truck for 10 minutes trying to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do. The smart choice was obvious. Take the job, fix his life, give Mia everything she deserved. But something about this felt dangerous. Not because Victoria was lying, but because she was telling the truth. She needed him. And people who needed things were unpredictable. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Mia's school. Reminder: tuition payment due by end of week. He looked at the text. Looked at the Veil Dynamics building in his rearview mirror. Then he opened the email app and typed a message to Victoria's assistant. "I'll take the job." The contract started on Monday. Ethan spent the weekend trying to convince himself he hadn't made a massive mistake. He read through the paperwork twice, looking for hidden clauses or obligations he'd missed. Everything seemed legitimate, almost too legitimate, which was exactly what worried him. Sunday night, Mia asked him why he kept staring at his phone. "Just work stuff," he said. "Is it bad work stuff?" "No, it's good, I think." She tilted her head the way she always did when she didn't believe him. "You don't look happy about good stuff." Ethan pulled her onto his lap. She was getting heavier, growing faster than he was ready for. "Sometimes good things are scary too." "Why?" "Because when something good happens, you start worrying about losing it." Mia considered this seriously. Then she patted his cheek. "Don't worry so much, Dad. You always figure it out." He wished he had her confidence. Monday morning arrived with rain hammering against the windows and Ethan's alarm going off an hour earlier than usual. He'd requested the day off from his old job, citing a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. His entire financial situation qualified as an emergency. He dropped Mia at school and drove to Veil Dynamics, the signing bonus already deposited in his account, like proof this was actually happening. The number still didn't feel real. He'd paid the tuition bill, the overdue electric, and the rent, and there was still money left over, actual money, not spare change scraped from couch cushions. Victoria's assistant met him in the lobby with a badge, a tablet, and an expression that suggested she'd dealt with far more complicated problems than one confused contractor. "Ms. Veil is in meetings all morning," Amanda said. "She asked me to get you set up with building access and introduce you to the facilities team. They'll show you where we keep maintenance records." "Sounds good." "Also, she wants to meet with you at noon." Her calendar just opened up. Look. Ethan nodded, trying not to look as out of place as he felt. The lobby alone probably cost more than his annual salary. Everything was glass and chrome and aggressively modern art that he didn't understand. Amanda led him through security and up to the 14th floor, where the facilities department occupied a series of offices that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never actually done manual labor. Everything was too clean, too organized, too detached from the reality of fixing things that broke. "This is Derek Chen, facilities manager," Amanda said, gesturing to a man in his 50s wearing a polo shirt with the Vail Dynamics logo. "Derek, this is Ethan Ryder. He'll be conducting the safety audits Ms. Vail requested." Derek's smile was professional, but his eyes were cold. "Right. The audits." Amanda left. Amanda. Derek's smile disappeared the second she was gone. "Let me guess," Derek said. "You're the guy who trapped our CEO in an elevator and now she's paying you to tell us how to do our jobs." "I didn't trap anyone. The elevator was already broken. And you just happened to be there to save her." "I was scheduled to be there. It's called a maintenance call." Derek crossed his arms. "I've been running facilities for this company for 12 years. We've never had a serious incident." "You've never had one that made the news," Ethan corrected. "That doesn't mean they haven't happened. You've been here 5 minutes and you're already making accusations?" "I'm stating facts. The executive elevator had 6 critical violations. The manual override was jammed. The backup power system was disconnected. Someone made those choices." Derek's jaw tightened. "We work within budget constraints. Sometimes that means prioritizing certain repairs over others. Prioritizing profit over safety. Prioritizing keeping this company running." They stared at each other. Ethan could feel this job getting more complicated by the second. "Look," he said finally, "I'm not here to get anyone fired. I'm here to fix problems before someone gets hurt. If you've got documentation showing when these systems were last inspected, that'd be a good place to start." Derek turned to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder so thin it was practically transparent. "Here. That's everything from the last 2 years." Ethan flipped through it. 3 pages. 3 pages covering 27 buildings and hundreds of elevator systems. "This is it?" "That's what we have." "Where's the rest?" "There is no rest. We log major repairs and annual inspections. Everything else is handled by outside contractors who keep their own records." "Which contractors?" "Depends on the building. We use whoever's cheapest." Ethan closed the folder. "I'm going to need access to every building Vail Dynamics operates. Full access. Maintenance rooms, electrical panels, elevator shafts, everything. That'll take weeks to arrange." "Then we better start now." Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded stiffly and walked away. Ethan stood there holding a folder that contained almost no useful information, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. His phone buzzed, a text from Amanda. "Ms. Vail is ready for you, 38th floor." Ethan took the elevator up, his stomach twisting with something that wasn't quite nerves, but wasn't quite confidence either. The doors opened directly into a reception area that led to Victoria's office. She was standing by the window when he walked in, phone pressed to her ear, talking in rapid sentences about quarterly projections and market forecasts. She saw him and held up one finger. "Wait." Ethan waited. The office was bigger than he remembered from Friday, more intimidating in daylight. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle, art on the walls that probably cost more than a house, a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of wood. Victoria ended the call and turned to face him. "How's your first day?" "Interesting." "Derek giving you problems?" "He's protecting his territory. Can't blame him for that." Victoria smiled slightly. "Most people would have complained." "I'm not most people." "So you keep saying." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. We need to talk about something." Ethan sat. Victoria stayed standing, which put her in the power position, and they both knew it. "The board meeting on Friday," she said. "The one I barely made it to after you pulled me out of that elevator. It didn't go well." "Did they vote you out?" "No, but it was close. Closer than it should have been. My uncle has more support than I thought." "What's his angle?" "Right. He thinks I'm destroying the company by focusing too much on innovation and not enough on profit. He wants to cut research and development, lay off a third of the workforce, and sell off assets to boost short-term stock prices. And that would help how? It wouldn't, but it would make him look good to shareholders who only care about quarterly earnings. By the time the long-term damage became obvious, he'd already be CEO, and I'd be the cautionary tale about why young people shouldn't run billion-dollar companies. Ethan leaned back. So what do you need from me? Exactly what I hired you for. Fix the buildings, document everything. Make it clear that I'm investing in infrastructure and safety instead of cutting corners. But I need it done fast. Fast? How fast? Well, the board meets again in 6 weeks. I need a full report by then showing measurable progress. That's not a lot of time. I know. And if I can't deliver? Victoria's expression hardened. Then we're both out of a job. The weight of that statement settled between them. Ethan thought about the signing bonus sitting in his bank account, thought about what would happen if this all fell apart in 6 weeks, and he was back to scraping by on emergency repair calls. Okay, he said. I'll make it work. You sure? No, but I don't have a better option. Victoria almost laughed. At least you're honest. It's cheaper than lying. She sat down finally, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Derek's going to fight you every step of the way. He's been here longer than I have, and he thinks I'm an inexperienced kid playing CEO. Is he wrong? About me being inexperienced? No. About me playing? Yes. She met Ethan's eyes. I'm fighting for my life here, and I need people around me who understand that. Ethan understood it more than she knew. They spent the next hour going over logistics, buildings to inspect, budgets to work within, people to coordinate with. It should have been boring, but it wasn't. Victoria talked about the company like it was a living thing she was trying to keep alive, not just a business, something that mattered. My father built this from nothing, she said at one point. He started in a garage with 3 employees and a product nobody believed in. By the time he died, Veil Dynamics employed 8,000 people. That's 8,000 families, depending on this company staying functional. And your uncle wants to cut a third of them. He wants to cut the ones who aren't immediately profitable, which includes most of our research division, all of our community outreach programs, and half our manufacturing staff. Sounds like a great guy. He's not evil, he's just short-sighted, and he thinks I'm even more short-sighted for caring about things like employee satisfaction and long-term innovation. Ethan checked his watch. I should get started if I'm going to inspect 27 buildings in 6 weeks. Victoria nodded. Keep me updated. And Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for taking this seriously. You're paying me to take it seriously. I'm paying you to inspect elevators. You're choosing to care about the rest. Ethan didn't have a response to that. He left the office and took the elevator back down, his head spinning with building codes and inspection schedules and the uncomfortable realization that he actually liked Victoria Veil. Not in a romantic way. At least he didn't think so. But there was something about the way she fought for what she believed in that reminded him of himself. Both of them trying to keep something from falling apart. Both of them terrified of failing. He spent the rest of the day touring the nearest Veil Dynamics property, a mid-rise office building 6 blocks from headquarters. The elevators were functional but outdated. The emergency lighting was barely code compliant. The backup generator hadn't been tested in 8 months. Ethan documented everything with photos and notes, his tablet filling up with violations that ranged from minor to genuinely dangerous. By the time he finished, it was past 6, and he was late picking up Mia. He called his neighbor apologetically. Can she stay another hour? I'll pay you extra. She's fine, Ethan. Take your time. But he didn't take his time. He rushed through traffic and picked Mia up at 7, guilt eating at him because this was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid. Working late. Missing dinner, becoming the kind of father who was always apologizing for not being there. Mia didn't complain. She never did. She just climbed into the truck and started telling him about her day, something about a boy in her class who'd eaten glue and had to go to the nurse. That's disgusting, Ethan said. That's what I said. But Tyler said it probably tasted like marshmallows. Did Tyler also eat glue? No. Tyler just thinks about it a lot. Ethan laughed despite everything. They stopped for fast food because he didn't have the energy to cook. Mia got chicken nuggets and spent the entire meal dipping them in ketchup and building a French fry fortress on her tray. Dad? Yeah? Are we rich now? Ethan almost choked on his burger. What? You got a new job. Does that mean we're rich? No, baby, we're not rich. But you paid the school money, and you didn't look worried when you paid it. She noticed everything. Ethan had known that intellectually, but it still caught him off guard sometimes. We're doing better, he said carefully. But that doesn't mean we're rich. It just means things are a little easier right now. Oh, Mia ate another nugget. Can we still get ice cream sometimes? Yeah, we can still get ice cream. Good. Because Taylor's mom says ice cream is important for brain development. Taylor's mom is very wise. Ito? But they finished dinner and drove home. Ethan helped Mia with homework, which mostly involved listening to her read a book about a dog who learned to surf. Then he tucked her into bed and collapsed on the couch, exhausted. His phone buzzed. An email from Victoria. How was day 1? Ethan stared at the message. It felt weirdly personal, like she was checking on him instead of checking on the work. He typed back. Productive. Found about 30 violations in the first building. Should have a full report by Wednesday. Her response came back immediately. 30? In one building? Welcome to reality. This is worse than I thought. Yeah, but it's fixable. There was a pause, then, I'm glad you're the one doing this. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. He closed the email and tried to sleep, but his brain wouldn't shut off. He kept thinking about Victoria standing in that office, talking about her father's company like it was her responsibility to protect. Kept thinking about the way Derek had looked at him like he was an intruder instead of someone trying to help. This job was going to make him enemies. He'd known that going in, but knowing it and experiencing it were different things. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a chaos of inspections, reports, and arguments with building managers who didn't want some outsider telling them their systems were broken. Ethan worked 12-hour days, sometimes longer, documenting every violation he found and prioritizing repairs by urgency. Some buildings were fine. Most were disasters waiting to happen. He found elevator cables held together with aftermarket parts that weren't rated for the load, fire suppression systems that hadn't been tested in years, emergency exits that were blocked or locked, electrical panels that were one short circuit away from starting a fire. Every report he sent to Victoria came back with the same response: fix it, whatever it costs. But fixing things cost time and money and political capital that Victoria was rapidly running out of. Derek fought him on every repair, citing budget constraints and scheduling conflicts. Other department heads started complaining that Ethan's inspections were disruptive and unnecessary. The tension came to a head on a Wednesday afternoon when Ethan showed up at a Vale Dynamics research facility and found the building manager refusing to let him inside. I don't care what your contract says, the manager said. I'm not shutting down our lab so you can inspect an elevator that's been working fine for 10 years. It's been working because nobody's checked it, Ethan countered. That doesn't mean it's safe. We have our own safety protocols, which apparently don't include elevator inspections. The manager crossed his arms. Take it up with Derek. I'm not authorizing this. Ethan called Victoria directly. She answered on the second ring. What's wrong? I'm at the research facility on Denny. Building manager won't give me access. Put him on. Ethan handed over his phone. The manager's expression went from stubborn to pale in about 30 seconds. He handed the phone back without a word and unlocked the building. You've got 2 hours, he muttered. Ethan took the 2 hours and found enough violations to justify an immediate shutdown. The main elevator's brake system was failing. The backup power was routed through a circuit that wasn't rated for the load. The emergency phone inside the car wasn't even connected. He called Victoria again. We need to close this building until repairs are done. For how long? 3 days minimum, maybe a week if we find more problems. Victoria was quiet for a moment. That's going to cost us a product launch. It's going to cost you a lawsuit if someone gets hurt. Do it. Ethan coordinated with a repair crew and spent the rest of the week at the facility, overseeing work that should have been done years ago. The building manager avoided him. The research staff glared at him in the hallways. He didn't care. He'd stopped caring what people thought about him somewhere around the third death trap, disguised as an elevator. By Friday, the building was back online, and Ethan was back at headquarters, compiling his reports into something coherent enough to present to Victoria's board. She called him up to her office late in the afternoon. He found her at her desk surrounded by paperwork, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Tell me something good, she said without preamble. We're making progress. That's not good enough. I need something I can show the board that proves I'm not wasting company money on unnecessary repairs. Ethan pulled up his tablet and showed her the numbers. We've inspected 19 buildings, found 462 violations, fixed 312 of them. The rest are scheduled for repair over the next 3 weeks. Victoria studied the data. This is a lot of money. It's a lot of violations. And if the board decides I'm overspending, then they're idiots. She actually smiled at that. You can't say that in the meeting. I wasn't planning to. Victoria leaned back in her chair. My uncle's been asking questions. About you. About why I hired an outside contractor instead of using our existing facilities team. What did you tell him? The truth. That I wanted an independent audit. He doesn't believe you. No. He thinks you're a vanity hire, someone I brought in to make myself look good. So, Ethan set down the tablet. Do you want me to meet with him? Would you? If it helps. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. You don't have to do this. I hired you to inspect buildings, not navigate corporate politics. Corporate politics are preventing me from inspecting buildings. So, yeah, I kind of do have to do this. You're stubborn. I'm practical. There's a difference? Not really. Victoria laughed quietly. It was the first time Ethan had heard her laugh without sounding exhausted underneath it. Okay, she said. I'll set up a meeting with Richard, but be careful. He's good at making people feel stupid for caring about things he thinks are unimportant. I've dealt with worse. The meeting happened on Monday. Richard Vale's office was on the 40th floor, 2 floors above Victoria's, which felt deliberate. The man himself was in his late 50s, gray hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. He didn't stand when Ethan walked in. Mr. Ryder, I've heard a lot about you. Probably nothing good. Richard smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. My niece speaks highly of your work, though I'll admit I'm curious why she felt the need to hire someone from outside the company. Because the people inside the company weren't doing the job. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious problem. Richard gestured to a chair. Ethan sat. They stared at each other across an expensive desk that was positioned to make visitors feel small. Walk me through your findings, Richard said. Ethan pulled up his tablet and showed him everything. The violations, the repairs, the cost breakdowns. Richard listened without interrupting, his expression never changing. When Ethan finished, Richard leaned back. This is a lot of money to spend on problems that haven't caused any actual incidents. They haven't caused incidents because we got lucky, or because the problems aren't as serious as you're claiming. Ethan kept his voice level. Your executive elevator almost killed your niece 3 weeks ago. If that's not serious, I don't know what is. That was one isolated incident. It was one visible incident. There have been dozens of others that didn't involve the CEO. Can you prove that? I can show you maintenance logs full of ignored violations and emergency repairs that were delayed for budget reasons. If you want proof, it's all there. Richard's smile tightened. You're very passionate about this. I'm very concerned about people dying. Of course, as are we all. Richard stood up. Richard, I appreciate you taking the time to walk me through this, Mr. Ryder. I'll take your findings under advisement. It was a dismissal. Ethan stood too. For what it's worth, he said, your niece is trying to do the right thing. You should be supporting her, not undermining her. Richard's expression went cold. I don't need career advice from a contractor, and I don't need permission from you to tell the truth. They stared at each other. Then Ethan walked out. He made it halfway to the elevator before his phone rang. Victoria. How bad was it? He thinks I'm exaggerating. Of course he does. Did he threaten you? Not directly, but he's going to push the board to shut this audit down. Victoria swore quietly. I'll handle it. How? Oh, I don't know yet, but I will. She hung up. Ethan stood there in the hallway, wondering if he'd just made everything worse. That night, he picked Mia up from school and took her to the park because they both needed air that didn't smell like corporate desperation. She played on the swings while he sat on a bench and tried to figure out his next move. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Board meeting moved up, Thursday instead of next month. Richard's calling for a vote on my leadership. Ethan's stomach dropped. Can you win? I don't know. Maybe. If I have something concrete to show them. I'll have the full report ready by Wednesday night. That might not be enough. Ethan stared at the message, then typed. Then we'll make it enough. He spent the next 3 days working around the clock, finished the last building inspections, compiled every violation, every repair, every dollar spent into a presentation that even a hostile board couldn't ignore. Wednesday night, he was still at headquarters at 11 p.m., double-checking numbers and fixing formatting errors. Victoria found him in a conference room surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. "You should go home," she said. "Almost done. Ethan." He looked up. She was standing in the doorway, looking exhausted and worried and human in a way that made his chest ache. "I can't lose this," she said quietly. "If the board votes me out tomorrow, everything my father built falls apart. And all those people depending on this company lose their jobs because I wasn't strong enough to protect them." "You are strong enough. How do you know?" "Because you're still fighting." Victoria walked into the room and sat down across from him. "You didn't have to do all this. The contract was for inspections, not 70-hour weeks and corporate warfare." "Yeah, well, turns out I'm bad at half measures." "Is that why your wife left?" The question hit like a punch. Ethan froze. "I'm sorry," Victoria said immediately. "That was inappropriate." "She didn't leave. She died." The words came out flat, factual. Ethan had said them so many times they'd stopped feeling real. Victoria's face crumpled. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry. It was 4 years ago. Cancer. She fought it for 18 months, but it wasn't enough." "Yes, ma'am. That's why you're doing this alone, raising your daughter by yourself." "Yeah." They sat in silence. Ethan could feel something shifting between them, some barrier breaking down that he wasn't sure he wanted gone. "I'm sorry I brought it up," Victoria said finally. "It's fine. People ask eventually." "Do you ever think about dating again?" "No." "Why not?" Ethan closed his laptop. "Because I barely have time to take care of Mia, and because nobody wants to date a guy who lives paycheck to paycheck and spends his nights fixing elevators." "I think you're underestimating yourself. I think you're being kind." Victoria smiled sadly. "Maybe we're both right, yeah." She helped him finish the presentation. They worked until past midnight, sitting on opposite sides of the table, arguing about phrasing and data visualization like it actually mattered. Maybe it did. Maybe this was the thing that would save Victoria's company, or maybe it would all fall apart tomorrow and none of this would mean anything. When they finally finished, Ethan drove home through empty streets and crawled into bed without bothering to change clothes. His alarm went off 4 hours later. He got Mia ready for school on autopilot, dropped her off, and headed back to Vail Dynamics for the meeting that would determine whether the last 3 weeks had been worth anything. The boardroom was exactly as intimidating as he'd expected. Long table, leather chairs, 15 people in expensive suits who all looked at Ethan like he was a problem they hadn't anticipated. Victoria sat at the head of the table. Richard sat at the opposite end. Everyone else was somewhere in between. Ethan set up his presentation and waited. The meeting started with Richard presenting his case. Victoria was overspending, focusing on the wrong priorities, making emotional decisions instead of practical ones. The safety audit was proof she didn't understand how to run a corporation efficiently. Then it was Ethan's turn. He walked them through everything, every building, every violation, every near-miss incident that had been buried in paperwork. He showed them photos of frayed cables and disconnected safety systems, and emergency equipment that hadn't worked in years. "These problems didn't appear overnight," he said. "They've been building for years because previous management chose profit over safety. Ms. Vail is the first person to actually address them. And if you vote her out for doing the right thing, you're not just hurting her, you're putting every employee in these buildings at risk." He sat down. The room was silent. Then Richard spoke. "Mr. Ryder's presentation is compelling, but it doesn't change the fundamental issue. Victoria is spending millions on repairs that may or may not be necessary based on one contractor's opinion." "It's not an opinion," Ethan said. "It's code compliance." "Codes can be interpreted different ways." "Not these codes. These are pretty clear." Richard's jaw tightened. "The board will make its decision based on what's best for the company financially." Bum. "And if someone dies in one of these buildings?" Ethan asked. "What's that going to cost you financially?" The room went even quieter. Finally, one of the board members spoke up. "I'd like to hear from Ms. Vail." Victoria stood. She looked small standing there in front of people who'd known her since she was a child. People who'd watched her father build this company and weren't sure she was capable of protecting it. My father used to say that a company is only as strong as the people who believe in it, she said. He didn't mean shareholders. He meant employees. The people who show up every day and do the work that makes this company function. And if we can't keep them safe, we don't deserve their belief. She looked directly at Richard. You want to cut costs and boost stock prices. I understand that. But I'm asking you to think about what we're cutting and who we're hurting and whether short-term profits are worth the long-term damage. Richard didn't blink. The board will vote. They voted. It was close. Closer than it should have been. But when the count finished, Victoria had held on to her position by 3 votes. Richard walked out without speaking to anyone. Victoria stayed in her chair, looking like she'd just survived something that almost killed her. The board members filed out. Ethan started packing up his equipment. Thank you, Victoria said quietly. Just doing my job. No, you did a lot more than that. Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. He left the building and sat in his truck for 10 minutes, hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline and relief. His phone buzzed. A text from Mia's school. Your daughter is in the office. She says she doesn't feel well. Ethan's heart dropped. He drove to the school, going 20 over the speed limit, and found Mia in the nurse's office looking pale and miserable. Hey baby, what's wrong? My stomach hurts. The nurse looked concerned. She threw up twice. I think it's just a virus, but you should take her home. Ethan signed her out and carried her to the truck. She was getting too big to carry, but she curled against his chest anyway, 7 years old and suddenly feeling much smaller. I'm sorry, she mumbled. For what? For getting sick on your important day. Ethan's throat tightened. You're more important than any day I'll ever have. He took her home and spent the rest of the afternoon taking care of her, bringing her water, making soup she didn't eat, lying on the couch with her head on his lap while she slept fitfully. His phone buzzed with messages from Victoria checking in. He didn't answer. Right now, the only thing that mattered was Mia. By evening, she was feeling better, still tired but no longer throwing up. Ethan made her toast, and she actually ate half of it. Dad? Yeah? Are we okay now? With money and stuff? He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. Yeah, baby, we're okay. Good, she yawned. Because I want to do soccer next year, and it costs money. Then we'll figure it out. She fell asleep before 8. Ethan sat on the couch and finally checked his phone. 12 messages from Victoria. All variations of, are you okay? And let me know if you need anything. He texted back. Mia's sick. I'm staying home with her tomorrow. Her response came immediately. Of course. Take care of her. And Ethan? Thank you for everything. He stared at the message for a long time before putting his phone down. Outside, rain started falling. The same rain that had been falling the night he met Victoria. The night that had changed everything. Ethan looked at his daughter sleeping in the next room. Looked at the apartment that didn't feel quite as suffocating as it had a month ago. Thought about Victoria standing in that boardroom, fighting for something she believed in even though everyone wanted her to fail. They were both still fighting, both still terrified of losing what they'd built. But maybe that was okay. Maybe fighting meant you still had something worth protecting. Mia recovered by the weekend, but Ethan didn't. Not from the exhaustion or the stress or the uncomfortable realization that somewhere in the last month, his life had become tangled up with Victoria Vales in ways he hadn't anticipated. Monday morning arrived with a phone call at 6 a.m. Ethan answered it half asleep, still in bed, Mia snoring quietly in the next room. Did I wake you? Victoria's voice came through crisp and alert, like she'd been up for hours. Yeah. Sorry, I need you to come to headquarters today. There's been a development. Ethan sat up, instantly awake. What kind of development? The kind where my uncle leaked internal documents to the press, claiming I falsified the safety audit to justify unnecessary spending. He what? It's all over the financial news. They're calling it a cover-up, saying I hired you to fabricate violations so I could funnel money to contractors. Ethan was already getting dressed, phone tucked between his ear and shoulder. That's insane. That's corporate warfare. Victoria's voice was tight. Can you be here in an hour? I need to drop Mia at school first. Bring her with you. I'll have someone watch her until school starts. Victoria, please, I need you here. I. She hung up before he could argue. Ethan woke Mia, explained they were making a detour, and got her dressed while she complained sleepily about not understanding why they had to leave so early. The drive downtown was tense. Ethan kept replaying Victoria's words. Falsified, cover-up, funnel money. All lies, but lies that sounded plausible if you didn't know the truth. Vale. Dynamics headquarters looked the same as always, but felt different. Ethan could sense it the moment they walked through the lobby. People staring, whispers following them to the elevator. Amanda met them on the 38th floor looking stressed. Ms. Vale is in her office, and you must be Mia. Mia looked up at Amanda with wide eyes. This building is really tall. It is. Would you like some hot chocolate while your dad has his meeting? Mia glanced at Ethan for permission. He nodded. Amanda led her away toward a break room, and Ethan headed to Victoria's office. She was standing by the window again, arms crossed, staring out at the city like it had personally betrayed her. When she turned around, Ethan could see the exhaustion carved into her face. "Tell me you kept records," she said without preamble. "Of course I kept records. Everything. Every inspection, every violation, every photo. Oh, all of it, backed up in 3 places." Victoria exhaled. "Good. Because Richard's claiming the violations never existed, that you made them up to justify billing inflated repair costs. I documented everything, timestamps, building codes, photos with metadata. It's all there. Can you prove it publicly? I can prove it to anyone who looks at the evidence." "Then we need to do that. Today." Victoria grabbed her phone. "I'm calling a press conference for this afternoon. You're going to present the findings again, but this time to reporters instead of the board." Ethan's stomach dropped. "I'm not a public speaker." "You don't have to be. You just have to tell the truth." "Victoria, I fix elevators. I don't handle media." She looked at him with something desperate in her eyes. "You're the only person who can prove I didn't fabricate this. If it comes from me, people will think I'm lying to save my job. But if it comes from you, an independent contractor with no stake in the company politics, it has credibility. What if I screw it up? Then we both lose everything." She said it simply, like it was just a fact they had to accept. "But I don't think you will." "What? Oh, but..." Well, Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to say this wasn't what he'd signed up for. But he looked at Victoria standing there fighting for her survival and realized he didn't actually have a choice, not if he wanted to live with himself afterward. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it, Tom." The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. That gave Ethan 4 hours to prepare, which wasn't nearly enough. He spent the time reviewing his documentation with Victoria's legal team, a group of lawyers who talked too fast and asked questions designed to poke holes in his evidence. "How do you know these violations weren't present before Ms. Vale became CEO?" one lawyer asked. "Because some of them reference equipment installed after her father died, and because the maintenance logs show ignored reports dating back 6 months, which is when she took over and the previous facilities manager stopped responding to safety concerns. Can you prove that definitively?" "I can show you the paper trail." Another lawyer jumped in. "What if opposing counsel argues you have a financial incentive to exaggerate the problems? Then opposing counsel doesn't understand building codes. These violations aren't subjective. They're measurable failures to meet safety standards." The lawyers looked at each other. One of them smiled slightly. "He'll be fine," she told Victoria. Ethan wasn't sure he agreed. At noon, Amanda brought Mia back. She'd been given a tour of the building and was vibrating with excitement about the executive floor's fish tank. "Dad, they have a fish that's bigger than my head." "That's great, baby. Can we get a fish tank?" "Let's talk about it later." Mia's enthusiasm faltered when she saw his face. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just have to do something I'm nervous about." "What?" "Talk to a lot of people." Mia considered this seriously. "Like a presentation?" "Kind of. We do those at school. Miss Sanders says if you're nervous, you should pretend everyone's wearing funny hats." "That's good advice." "Is she? Do you want me to come watch?" "I'm really good at pretending." Ethan crouched down to her level. I need you to stay here with Amanda, but you being here helps, okay? Mia threw her arms around his neck. You're going to do great, Dad. He held her tight, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, letting her confidence fill the spaces where his own was missing. The press conference was held in a corporate meeting room that had been converted into something resembling a legitimate media event. Reporters packed the space, cameras set up in the back, microphones arranged on a table at the front. Victoria stood off to the side with her legal team, looking composed in a way that Ethan knew was mostly performance. He took his seat at the table. Someone clipped a microphone to his collar. The room buzzed with conversations he couldn't quite hear. Then Victoria stepped up to the podium. Thank you all for coming. Over the past 24 hours, there have been serious allegations made about Veil Dynamics' recent safety audit. I'm here to address those allegations directly and to present evidence that contradicts the narrative being pushed by certain board members who have a vested interest in my removal as CEO. She nodded at Ethan. He stood up, tablet in hand, and approached the podium. Every camera in the room turned toward him. My name is Ethan Ryder. I'm an elevator technician and safety inspector. 6 weeks ago, Ms. Veil contracted me to conduct an independent audit of all properties owned or operated by Veil Dynamics. What I found was a systematic failure of safety maintenance across 27 buildings. He pulled up the first photo on the screen behind him, a frayed elevator cable. This cable was holding a passenger car in a downtown office building. It had been reported as needing replacement 8 months ago. The repair was delayed due to budget constraints. If it had snapped, everyone in that elevator would have died. Next photo, a disconnected emergency phone. This emergency communication system hasn't worked in 3 years. Nobody noticed because nobody checked. He's photo after photo, violation after violation. Ethan walked them through everything, his voice steady despite the anxiety eating at his gut. He showed them the maintenance logs, the ignored reports, the pattern of deferred maintenance that went back years before Victoria even became CEO. Ms. Veil didn't create these problems, he said. She inherited them, and she's the first person in leadership who actually tried to fix them instead of hiding them. The allegation that this audit was fabricated is not only false, it's dangerous, because it suggests that telling the truth about safety violations is somehow worse than letting them continue. He stepped back from the podium. The room erupted with questions. Mr. Ryder, how much were you paid for this audit? My contract details are public record. I was paid standard industry rates. Do you have any personal relationship with Ms. Veil? No. I met her 6 weeks ago when I pulled her out of a malfunctioning elevator. Are you willing to testify under oath about these findings? Yes. More questions came rapid fire. Ethan answered them as clearly as he could, aware of Victoria watching from the side, her expression unreadable. Finally, a reporter in the back raised her hand. Mr. Ryder, what do you think should happen to the people responsible for allowing these violations to continue? Ethan paused. This was a trap question and everyone in the room knew it. I think, he said carefully, that the focus should be on fixing the problems, not punishing people. But I also think accountability matters. And anyone who deliberately ignored safety concerns to save money needs to explain why they thought profit was more important than human lives. The room went quiet. Victoria returned to the podium. Thank you, Mr. Ryder. I'll take a few more questions. Ethan stepped away and found a seat near the back. His hands were shaking. Amanda appeared beside him with a bottle of water. You did really well, she whispered. I have no idea what I just did. You told the truth. That's all you needed to do. The press conference wrapped up 20 minutes later. Victoria fielded questions with the kind of practiced calm that came from years of dealing with hostile shareholders. She didn't flinch when reporters asked if she was planning to sue her uncle. Didn't hesitate when someone suggested this whole situation proved she was too inexperienced to run the company. When it finally ended, she walked off the podium and found Ethan in the hallway. How bad was it? She asked. You're asking me? You're the only person here who'll tell me the truth. Ethan thought about it. I think you held your own, but I don't know if it was enough to change anyone's mind. Victoria nodded slowly. That's what I thought too. They walked back to her office in silence. Mia was waiting there, curled up in one of the leather chairs, reading a book Amanda had found for her. Dad, you're done. Yeah, baby. I'm done. Did you pretend they were wearing funny hats? Victoria looked at Ethan questioningly. He shrugged. Something my daughter taught me about public speaking. Did it work? I have no idea. Victoria almost smiled. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression hardened. I need to take this. Amanda can drive you both home if you want to leave. You okay? Not really, but I will be. She looked at Mia. Thank you for letting me borrow your dad today. He was very brave. Mia beamed. He's always brave. Oh, Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. He gathered Mia and their things and headed for the elevator, leaving Victoria to deal with whatever crisis was coming next. The media coverage hit that evening. Every news station in Seattle ran some version of the story. Most were surprisingly fair, presenting both sides and leaving viewers to draw their own conclusions. But the financial networks were brutal, dissecting Victoria's leadership and questioning whether she had the experience to handle a crisis of this magnitude. Ethan watched it all from his couch. Mia asleep beside him, feeling helpless and angry in equal measure. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Just 2 words. Thank you. He typed back, Are you okay? Her response took several minutes. I don't know, but I'm still here. That was Tuesday. Wednesday brought a new disaster. Richard Vail filed a formal complaint with the State Regulatory Board, demanding an independent investigation into the safety audit. He claimed Ethan had violated inspection protocols, and that Victoria had pressured him to falsify reports. It was all nonsense, but it was official nonsense, which meant lawyers and investigators and a process that could drag on for months. Victoria called Ethan early Wednesday morning. They're going to interview you, the state investigators, probably next week. Let them. I've got nothing to hide. Richard's trying to make you the villain in this. If he can discredit you, he discredits the entire audit. So we prove him wrong. It's not that simple. He has resources, lawyers, political connections. He can make your life very difficult. Ethan heard something in her voice. Fear, not for herself, for him. Victoria, I knew what I was signing up for. Did you? Because this is about to get a lot worse. She was right. By Thursday, reporters were camped outside Ethan's apartment building. Not many, but enough to be intrusive. Enough that Mia asked why people with cameras were following them to the truck. They're just doing their jobs, Ethan said, which wasn't really an answer. One reporter caught him in the parking lot. Mr. Ryder, is it true you were fired from your previous employer for filing false safety reports? Ethan stopped. What? We spoke with your former supervisor. He claims you had a history of exaggerating violations to increase billing hours. That's a lie. So you deny the allegations? I deny that anyone at my previous company would say that, because it's not true. The reporter smiled like he'd gotten exactly what he wanted and walked away. Ethan got in his truck, hands shaking with rage. He called his old boss, a man named Frank, who'd employed him for 5 years. Frank, did a reporter call you asking about my work history? Yeah, yesterday. Some guy wanting to know if you were reliable. What did you tell him? That you were one of the best techs I ever had. Why? Because someone's claiming you said I falsified safety reports. Frank swore. That's bullshit. I never said anything like that. Can you go on record saying that? Absolutely. You want me to call this guy back? Please. Ethan hung up and immediately called Victoria. Told her what happened. Richard's hiring people to dig up dirt, she said, or invent it if they can't find any. How do we stop this? We don't. We just survive it. That wasn't the answer Ethan wanted to hear. The next few days were a nightmare of damage control. Frank gave an interview contradicting the false story. Victoria's legal team issued statements, but the damage was done. Enough people believed the lie that it didn't matter whether it was true. Ethan started getting phone calls from other contractors, some offering support, others warning him that he was destroying his reputation by getting involved in corporate politics. His current employer called to tell him they were putting him on unpaid leave pending the investigation. We can't have someone under scrutiny working on our sites, the HR rep said apologetically. I'm sure you understand. Ethan understood perfectly. He was toxic now, and toxicity spread. By Friday, he was officially unemployed for the second time in 2 months. He didn't tell Mia. She was too young to understand why her father's name was suddenly on the news, why strangers were saying mean things about him, why he looked exhausted all the time. Friday night, his neighbor knocked on the door. The same woman who'd been watching Mia for years, who'd never asked for anything except occasional grocery money. "Ethan, I need to talk to you." He invited her in. She stood awkwardly in his kitchen, avoiding eye contact. "I got a phone call today," she said. "Someone asking questions about you, about whether you're a good father, whether Mia is being taken care of properly." Ethan's blood went cold. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that you're a great dad and Mia is happy and healthy. But Ethan, whoever called me, they weren't friendly. They were looking for something to use against you." "Did they say who they were?" "No, just that they were conducting background research." After she left, Ethan sat on his couch and tried to process what was happening. Richard Vale wasn't just trying to discredit him professionally, he was going after Ethan's family, trying to paint him as an unfit parent to destroy any credibility he had left. His phone rang. "Victoria, I just heard about the call to your neighbor. How did you—" "My lawyer has contacts. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never thought Richard would go after Mia." "He didn't go after Mia. He's going after me. It's the same thing." Victoria's voice cracked. "I should end this. I should withdraw from the CEO position and let Richard have what he wants, before anyone else gets hurt. Don't you dare! Ethan, don't you dare give up. Because if you do, everything we just went through was for nothing. Every violation I documented, every repair we fought for, all of it disappears the second Richard takes over. And the next time someone gets trapped in a broken elevator, it'll be because we weren't strong enough to finish what we started." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." "Yeah, you do. You're terrified and exhausted, and you want to quit. But you won't. Because you're the kind of person who shows up even when everything's falling apart." "How do you know that?" "Because I watched you walk 42 floors in heels to make a board meeting. Anyone with that much stubborn determination isn't going to quit now." She laughed quietly. It sounded like crying. "I'm bringing Mia into this. I'm destroying your life. My life was already barely functional. At least now I'm being destroyed for something that matters. That's not funny." "It's a little funny." Victoria exhaled. "Will you meet me tomorrow? Just to talk. Not about work. I just need to see another human being who doesn't hate me." "Where?" "There's a park near the waterfront, Pike Place area. I'll text you the address." "I'll bring Mia." "Good. I'd like to see her again." "Yeah." They hung up. Ethan stared at his phone, wondering when his life had become so complicated that meeting Victoria Vale in a park felt like the simplest thing in his schedule. Saturday morning was overcast but not raining. Ethan drove to the waterfront with Mia chattering about whether the big fish at Vale Dynamics headquarters had a name and whether they could visit it again sometime. Victoria was already at the park when they arrived, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. She was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. She looked younger, more human, more like someone who could actually be Ethan's friend instead of his employer. Mia ran ahead and climbed on the playground equipment. Victoria watched her with something wistful in her expression. "She's beautiful," Victoria said. "She looks like her mom." "Tell me about her, your wife." Ethan sat down on the bench. This was dangerous territory. He didn't talk about Sarah, not with anyone except Mia, and even then only when Mia asked. But something about Victoria made him want to try. Her name was Sarah. We met in high school. Got married too young because we were stupid and in love and thought that was enough. Turns out it was. He smiled despite the ache in his chest. She was funny, made friends with everyone, could talk her way into or out of anything. She's the one who convinced me to become an elevator tech because she said I was good at fixing broken things. Were you? I don't know. I couldn't fix her, see? Victoria didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. She just sat beside him and watched Mia play. "My father used to bring me to this park," she said eventually. "Ijimotoki, Shichi. Before the company got too big and he got too busy. We'd come here on Sundays and he'd let me climb on everything while he read the newspaper. I remember thinking he was the most important person in the world because everyone knew his name." "Was he? Important?" "Yeah. But not in the way I thought. He built something that mattered to people, not just as an employer, but as someone who believed companies had responsibilities beyond profit. He used to say that if your success requires someone else's suffering, you're not successful. You're just cruel. Sounds like someone I would have liked. He would have liked you too. Sounds like someone I would have. He had no patience for people who talked too much and didn't do anything. You're the opposite of that. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Mia hang upside down from the monkey bars. "Dad, look!" she yelled. "I'm looking. I can see everything backwards." Ethan laughed. Victoria did too, a real laugh that didn't sound exhausted underneath. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Sure." "Why did you say yes to the consulting job? You knew it was going to be complicated." "Because I needed the money. That's not the only reason." Ethan thought about it. "I spent 4 years barely keeping my head above water, working jobs that didn't matter, fixing problems nobody cared about, trying to give Mia a life that didn't feel like we were constantly one crisis away from disaster. And then you offered me a chance to do something that actually mattered, something that might make a difference. I couldn't say no to that, even knowing what it would cost. I didn't know what it would cost, but yeah, even if I had." Victoria looked at him with something unreadable in her expression. "You're a better person than I am." "I really don't think that's true." "It is. You risk things because you believe in doing the right thing. I risk things because I'm too proud to admit when I'm losing. Maybe we're both just stubborn idiots. Definitely that." Mia ran over, breathless and pink-cheeked. "Can we get ice cream? It's 10 in the morning. Ice cream doesn't have a schedule, Dad." Victoria stood up. "She's right. Ice cream is timeless. I'll buy." "You don't have to." "I want to." They walked to a nearby shop that sold overpriced ice cream to tourists. Mia ordered cookie dough. Ethan got coffee flavor. Victoria chose something with lavender that looked more like art than food. They sat outside at a metal table, Mia swinging her legs and talking about a book she was reading in school about a girl who could talk to animals. "Do you think that's real?" Mia asked Victoria seriously. "Talking to animals?" "Yeah, like really talking, not just pretending." Victoria considered this with the same seriousness Mia had asked it. "I think some people are better at understanding animals than other people. Maybe that's close enough to talking." "That's what I think too. Dad says it's made up, but I think he's wrong." "I'm sitting right here," Ethan said. "I know. That's why I'm telling her instead of you, Chait." Victoria laughed so hard she almost dropped her ice cream. They spent 2 hours at the park. 2 hours where nobody mentioned corporate politics or safety violations or investigations. 2 hours where Ethan almost forgot that his life was falling apart and Victoria almost forgot she was fighting for her survival. When it was time to leave, Mia hugged Victoria without being asked. "Thanks for the ice cream. Anytime." Ethan and Victoria locked eyes over Mia's head. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. Or just the acknowledgement that they were both trying their best and hoping it would be enough. On the drive home, Mia asked the question Ethan had been dreading. "Do you like Miss Victoria?" She's nice." "That's not what I asked." Ethan glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "What are you really asking? Are you going to marry her?" "What?" "No, we're not. We're just friends." "But you could marry her, if you wanted to." "It doesn't work like that, baby." "Why not?" "Because Victoria Vale lived in a world of corporate empires and billion-dollar decisions, and Ethan barely managed to keep his truck running, because she was fighting battles he didn't fully understand, and he was just trying to make it through each day without failing Mia, because people like them didn't end up together except in movies that had nothing to do with real life. But he couldn't say any of that to a 7-year-old. "Because we're too different," he said instead. "Different how?" "Just different." Mia was quiet for a minute, then, "I think she's lonely." "What makes you say that?" "She smiles a lot, but her eyes look sad, like she's pretending to be happy." Ethan's throat tightened. His 7-year-old daughter had just described Victoria Vale more accurately than anyone else he'd met. "Maybe she is lonely," he said quietly. "Then you should be her friend. So she's not lonely anymore." "I am her friend." "Good. Because everyone needs friends." That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Thank you for today. I needed that more than you know." He stared at the message for a long time before responding. Me too. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Mia's right. Ice cream is timeless. Ethan smiled despite everything. She usually is. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. Another pause. Then, I'll see you Monday. The investigator wants to interview you at 9 a.m. Just like that, the real world crashed back in. I'll be there. Ethan set his phone down and stared at the ceiling, listening to his daughter breathe in the next room. Thinking about Victoria sitting alone in whatever expensive apartment she lived in, both of them preparing for another week of fighting battles they weren't sure they could win. But for 2 hours today, sitting in a park eating ice cream, none of that had mattered. And maybe that was enough to keep going. The state investigator's name was Margaret Chen. No relation to Amanda despite sharing a last name. She was in her 50s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of person who'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. She set up in a conference room on the 20th floor, away from Victoria's executive suite. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time reviewing his documentation one more time, even though he could recite every violation from memory. Victoria met him at the hallway outside. You don't have to do this alone. I can have a lawyer sit in with you. That makes me look like I have something to hide. It makes you look like you're protecting yourself. I'm fine. Victoria studied his face. You're scared. Terrified. But I'm still fine. She reached out like she was going to touch his arm, then stopped herself. Just tell the truth. That's all you need to do. What if the truth isn't enough? Then we find another way. Margaret Chen opened the door before Victoria could say anything else. She looked between them with an expression that suggested she'd already drawn conclusions about their relationship. Mr. Ryder, please come in. The interview lasted 3 hours. Margaret went through every inspection report line by line, asking for clarification on terminology, questioning his methods, probing for inconsistencies. Ethan answered everything as clearly as he could, pulling up photos and maintenance logs to support his findings. Walk me through the executive elevator incident, Margaret said. The one involving Ms. Vale. I received a maintenance call about a power failure. When I arrived, the elevator was stuck between floors with Miss Vale inside. The backup power system had failed, and the manual override was jammed. And you determined this was due to negligence? I determined it was due to deferred maintenance. The system had multiple documented violations that were reported but not addressed. Who made those reports? Previous contractors. Going back 8 months. And where are those reports now? In the company's maintenance files. I included copies in my documentation. Margaret made a note. Mr. Ryder, I need to ask you directly. Did Ms. Vale at any point pressure you to exaggerate or falsify safety violations? No. Did she offer you financial incentives beyond your contract to support her position with the board? No. Has she promised you future employment or other benefits contingent on your testimony? No. She paid me to inspect buildings and document violations. That's it. Margaret leaned back. You understand that several people have suggested your relationship with Ms. Vale goes beyond professional. Ethan kept his voice level. What people suggest doesn't change the facts. The violations existed. I documented them. Everything I reported is verifiable by any qualified inspector. But you can see how it looks. A CEO facing removal hires an outside contractor who conveniently finds hundreds of violations that justify millions in spending, which makes her look responsible and conscientious right when she needs the board's support. That would make sense if the violations didn't actually exist, but they do. You can verify every single one. I intend to. The interview continued. Margaret asked about his previous employment, his credentials, his methodology. She asked about the press conference, about Victoria's legal team, about whether he understood the political implications of his testimony. By the time she finally let him go, Ethan felt like he'd been interrogated for a crime he didn't commit. Victoria was waiting in her office. She looked up when he walked in. How bad? She thinks we're lying. Can she prove it? Not unless she ignores all the evidence. Victoria closed her laptop. Richard's been feeding her information, trying to frame this as a conspiracy between us. Is it working? I don't know yet. Ethan sat down heavily. Every muscle in his body ached from tension. How much longer can this go on? The investigation could take weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we wait and hope the truth actually matters. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from Mia's school. He read it and felt his stomach drop. I have to go. What's wrong? Mia got in a fight. He was out the door before Victoria could respond, taking the stairs because waiting for an elevator felt impossible. His truck wouldn't start at first, the engine coughing and dying twice before finally turning over. He drove to the school, going 20 over the limit, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The principal's office was exactly as depressing as he remembered from his own childhood. Beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, the smell of old carpet and broken dreams. Mia sat in one of those chairs, arms crossed, face set in an expression Ethan had never seen before. Defiant, angry, hurt. The principal was a woman named Mrs. Patterson who looked exhausted before the conversation even started. Mr. Ryder, thank you for coming so quickly. What happened? Mia got into a physical altercation with another student during lunch. She pushed him hard enough that he fell and scraped his knee. Ethan looked at his daughter. Is that true? Mia's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Why? He said you were a liar. He said his dad saw it on the news, that you made up stuff to help your girlfriend steal money. The words hit Ethan like a punch. He looked at Mrs. Patterson. Did this other kid get in trouble for saying that? We're addressing the verbal component of the incident separately, but Mia's response was physically aggressive, which is why... So he can call her father a criminal, and that's just words, but when she defends herself, that's violence. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. Mr. Ryder, I understand this is a difficult situation, but we have a zero-tolerance policy for physical altercations. What about a zero-tolerance policy for bullying? Name-calling is different from physical violence. Not when the name-calling is based on lies being spread by adults who should know better. Regardless of the circumstances, Mia's suspended for the rest of the week. Ethan wanted to argue. Wanted to tell this woman that his daughter had just defended him from accusations that weren't even true. That she was 7 years old and shouldn't have to deal with adult problems bleeding into her school life. But he could see there was no point. Fine, we're leaving. He took Mia's hand and walked out. She was quiet until they got to the truck. Then she started crying. Not dramatic sobbing, just tears running down her face while she stared straight ahead. I'm sorry, Dad. For what? For pushing Tyler. I know I'm not supposed to push people. Ethan pulled her into a hug. You were protecting me. I'm not mad about that. But I got suspended. Yeah, you did, and pushing people is wrong even when they deserve it. But I understand why you did it. Mia pulled back, wiping her eyes. Is it true, what Tyler said? No, baby, it's not true. Then why are people saying it? Because sometimes people lie when they want to hurt someone. And right now there are people who want to hurt Miss Victoria. So they're lying about me to make her look bad. That's stupid. Yeah, it really is. They drove home in silence. Ethan made grilled cheese for lunch, even though neither of them were hungry. Mia picked at hers, then finally asked the question he'd been dreading. Are we going to be okay? Ethan wanted to lie. Wanted to promise her everything would work out fine. But he'd learned that lying to Mia never helped. I don't know, he said honestly. Right now things are really hard, but we're going to get through it. How do you know? Because we always do. Yes. Mia seemed to accept this. She finished half her sandwich and went to her room to read. Ethan sat at the kitchen table and stared at bills he couldn't pay and a future that looked increasingly unstable. His phone rang. Victoria. I heard about Mia. Is she okay? She's suspended for defending me. Victoria swore quietly. This is my fault. All of this. It's Richard's fault. Don't take credit for his cruelty. I should have known he'd go after your family. I should have protected you better. You can't protect me from everything. I should have tried harder. Ethan heard something breaking in her voice. Victoria, where are you? My office. Are you alone? Yes. I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm coming over. He called his neighbor to watch Mia, threw on a clean shirt, and drove back downtown. The Vail Dynamics building felt different in the late afternoon, quieter, less intimidating. Or maybe Ethan was just too tired to be intimidated anymore. Victoria's office was dark except for the desk lamp. She was sitting on the floor by the window, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Ethan sat down beside her. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "I don't remember." "When did you last sleep?" Same answer. He pulled out his phone and ordered food delivery. Then he just sat there with her, not talking, watching the city lights come on as the sun set. "I'm going to lose," Victoria said eventually. "Richard has too much support. The investigation is taking too long. The board is getting impatient. Even if Margaret clears us, the damage is done." "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Keep fighting until they force me out, I guess." "That's a terrible plan. You have a better one?" "Not really." Victoria laughed, but it sounded hollow. "We're quite a pair. The CEO who's losing her company and the contractor who's losing his career." "When you say it like that, it sounds almost romantic." "Does it?" "No, it sounds depressing." The food arrived, some Thai place that delivered to downtown offices after hours. They ate in silence, sitting on the floor of a billion-dollar corporate suite like two broke college kids in a dorm room. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Sure." "Why do you keep helping me? You could walk away right now. Tell the investigators you want nothing to do with this. Protect yourself and Mia from all of it." Ethan thought about it. "Because if I walk away, Richard wins. And if Richard wins, every corner he cuts to boost profits becomes the new normal. And the next time an elevator fails, it won't be you trapped inside. It'll be some random person who never asked for any of this." "That's very noble. It's very practical. I'm not trying to save the world. I'm just trying to make sure the buildings I inspected don't kill anyone. It's still noble, if you say so." Victoria set down her food container. "I need to tell you something, and you're probably going to be angry." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What?" "Richard came to see me yesterday. He offered me a deal. I stepped down voluntarily, he drops the investigation, and everyone moves on." "What did you say?" "I said no, obviously. But he also offered to leave you alone. No more attacks on your reputation. No more investigators asking questions. He'd make sure you could go back to work without any problems. In exchange for my resignation and your testimony that the safety audit was exaggerated for political purposes." Ethan stared at her. "He wants me to lie. He wants you to save yourself. By destroying you, us. By admitting that maybe some of the violations weren't as serious as we claimed. That we both got caught up in corporate politics and made some questionable choices. And you're telling me this why?" Victoria met his eyes. "Because it's an option. For you and Mia. A way out of this mess that doesn't involve months of investigation and public scrutiny. You want me to take it. I want you to know it exists." "Assess." Ethan stood up. His hands were shaking. "You think I'd sell you out to protect myself? I think you have a daughter who got suspended today for defending you. I think you're unemployed and probably running out of money. I think you have every reason to take the deal and no good reason to refuse it, except for the fact that it's based on lies. Lies that would give Mia her normal life back. I'm not teaching my daughter that lying is acceptable when it's convenient. Even if refusing costs you everything? Especially then." They stared at each other. Victoria's expression crumpled. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have told you. I just wanted you to know you have options. The only option I have is telling the truth, same as you. The truth might not be enough. Then we go down telling it anyway." Victoria looked at him like he'd just said something impossible. "Why are you so stubborn?" "Same reason you are. Because giving up feels worse than failing." Dishi seti wasi. She stood up and moved closer to him. Close enough that Ethan could see the exhaustion in her face, the fear she was trying to hide. Close enough that he realized somewhere in the last 2 months, she'd become important to him in ways that had nothing to do with paychecks or contracts. "I don't deserve your loyalty," she said quietly. "Probably not, but you have it anyway." "Why?" "Because you're trying to do the right thing even though it's destroying you, and I respect that." "That's a stupid reason." "Yeah, it really is." Victoria smiled despite everything. Then her expression shifted, became something vulnerable and uncertain. "Ethan, I need to tell you something else. If it's another deal from Richard, I don't want to hear it. It's not that. It's about me and you. And the fact that I've been trying very hard not to acknowledge that I have feelings I shouldn't have. Ethan's heart stopped. Victoria, let me finish, please. She took a breath. I know this is inappropriate. I know you work for me and we're in the middle of a crisis, and this is possibly the worst timing in the history of bad timing. But I can't keep pretending that working with you has been purely professional, because it hasn't. Not for a while now, Charchito. Ethan didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to do with the fact that Victoria Vale, the woman who terrified boardrooms and ran a billion-dollar company, was standing in front of him admitting she had feelings she couldn't control. I'm not asking you to do anything about it, she continued. I'm not expecting you to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. Because if this all falls apart and I lose everything, I don't want to regret not being honest about this one thing. The silence stretched between them. Ethan thought about Mia asking if he was going to marry Victoria. Thought about sitting in the park eating ice cream, about Victoria laughing without the exhaustion underneath. Thought about the fact that he'd been lying to himself about his own feelings for weeks now. I can't do this, he said finally. Victoria's face went carefully blank. I understand. No, you don't. I can't do this because you're my employer, because we're in the middle of an investigation, because Mia doesn't need me adding more chaos to her life right now, and because I have no idea if what I'm feeling is real or just proximity and shared trauma. So you do feel something. I don't know what I feel, but it's not nothing. Victoria's expression shifted, hope mixed with fear. What does that mean? It means if we survive this, if the investigation clears us, and Richard backs off and life goes back to something resembling normal, we can figure out what this is. But not now. Not while everything's falling apart. That's very rational. I'm trying to be smart about this. And if we don't survive it, if everything falls apart, then at least we'll know we tried to do things right. Victoria nodded slowly. Okay, we wait. We wait. She moved back, putting distance between them again. The moment broke, but something remained. An understanding. An acknowledgement that whatever was happening between them was real enough to be worth protecting. Ethan left an hour later, driving home through empty streets, his head spinning with everything that had just happened. He picked up Mia from the neighbor's place, carried her sleeping body up to their apartment, and tucked her into bed. Then he sat on his couch and tried to process the fact that Victoria Vale had just admitted she had feelings for him. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thank you for not taking the deal. Thank you for not expecting me to. I meant what I said. About having feelings? I know. Does that scare you? Ethan stared at the message. The honest answer was yes. It scared him because it was complicated and messy and had the potential to hurt everyone involved. It scared him because he hadn't felt this way about anyone since Sarah died, and he didn't know if he was ready. But it also didn't scare him, because Victoria understood what it meant to keep fighting, even when everything was falling apart. Because she'd looked at his life and seen someone worth knowing instead of someone barely surviving. Yeah, he typed back, but I'm scared of most things these days. Me too. We're a mess. We really are. Good night, Victoria. Good night, Ethan. He set his phone down and closed his eyes. Knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. Knowing tomorrow would bring new problems and new fights, and possibly new disasters. But for the first time in months, he didn't feel quite so alone in it. The next morning brought exactly the disaster Ethan had anticipated. Margaret Chen released a preliminary report to the board, stating that while she'd found no evidence of fabricated safety violations, there were questions about the timing and scope of the audit that warranted further investigation. It was political language for, I don't think they're lying, but I can't prove they're telling the truth. Richard seized on it immediately, called an emergency board meeting, demanded Victoria's immediate resignation pending the completion of the investigation. Victoria called Ethan at 7 a.m. The board meets in 3 hours. This is it. This is when they vote me out. You don't know that. I can count, Ethan. Richard has the votes. Unless something changes in the next 3 hours, I'm done. Then we change something. How? Ethan's mind raced. There had to be something they were missing. some piece of evidence or testimony or leverage they hadn't used yet. Then it hit him. The maintenance logs. The ones from before you became CEO sheet. What about them? Derek said they only kept records going back 2 years, but corporations don't just throw away documentation. There has to be an archive somewhere. Even if there is, what good does it do us? Because if we can prove the violations existed before you took over, we can prove you inherited the problem instead of creating it. We can show that previous management, including Richard when he was on the executive board, ignored safety concerns for years. Victoria was quiet for a moment. That would shift the narrative. It would prove you were fixing Richard's mess instead of making your own. The archives are in a storage facility across town. I'd need permission to access them. So get permission. From who? The board that's about to fire me? From whoever's in charge of records retention. Call them right now. Victoria hung up. Ethan paced his apartment, Mia eating cereal and watching him with concerned eyes. Is Miss Victoria in trouble? She asked. Yeah, baby, she is. Are you going to help her? I'm trying. Then you'll figure it out. You always do. Ethan wished he had her confidence. His phone rang. Victoria. I got access to the archives, but I can't leave headquarters right now. If the board thinks I'm avoiding the meeting, I'll go. Ethan, you don't know what you're looking for. Tell me what to look for, and I'll find it. She gave him the address and a list of document types. Ethan grabbed his keys. I have to go out for a little while. Can you stay here? Mia looked up from her cereal. By myself? Yeah. Just for an hour. Keep the door locked. Don't answer it for anyone except me. I'm 7. I know, and I'm sorry, but this is important. She studied his face with the seriousness of someone much older. Okay, but you have to come back. I promise, Sut. He drove across town to an industrial building that looked like it stored more secrets than supplies. The records manager was a tired-looking man who clearly didn't care about corporate politics as long as his paperwork was in order. You're looking for maintenance files from 2018 to 2020? Specifically for Veil Dynamics properties. That's going to be a lot of boxes. Then point me at them and I'll start looking. The manager led him to a room full of filing cabinets and boxes stacked floor to ceiling. Good luck. Ethan started pulling files. Years of maintenance reports, inspection records, safety complaints. Most of it was routine, but buried in the middle of a box from 2019, he found it. A safety report filed by an outside inspector recommending immediate repairs to the executive elevator system. Estimated cost, $40,000. Signed off on by the facilities manager at the time, and rejected by the executive board for budgetary reasons. The board's signature at the bottom belonged to Richard Veil. Ethan photographed every page. Then he kept digging and found more. Report after report documenting serious safety concerns across multiple Veil Dynamics properties. All of them ignored or deferred. All of them predating Victoria's tenure as CEO by years. He called her. I found it. Richard personally rejected safety repairs in 2019. I've got documentation proving he prioritized budget over safety for years before you took over. Victoria's voice was tight. Can you get those documents to me in the next hour? I'm leaving right now. Ethan thanked the records manager and drove back to headquarters, going 30 over the limit. He made it to the building with 20 minutes to spare before the board meeting. Victoria met him in the lobby with her legal team. They reviewed the documents quickly, photographing pages and compiling them into a presentation. This changes everything, one of the lawyers said. Will it be enough? Victoria asked. It proves Richard's a hypocrite. Whether that saves your job depends on how much the board cares about hypocrisy. They went upstairs together. Ethan wasn't invited to the board meeting, but he waited outside, pacing the hallway like an expectant father, checking his phone every 30 seconds. An hour passed, then 90 minutes, then 2 hours. Finally, the boardroom doors opened. Victoria walked out first. Her face was unreadable. Ethan stood up. Well? She looked at him, then smiled. They tabled the vote, pending a full investigation into Richard's role in creating the safety violations. Does that mean it means I'm still CEO for now? Relief flooded through Ethan so intense he almost sat down. For now is better than not at all. Richard walked out. He's threatening to sue the company for defamation. Let him. We've got documentation. Victoria laughed, the sound half exhausted and half triumphant. We actually did it. We survived. We survived today. Tomorrow might be different. Then we'll deal with tomorrow when it comes. And they stood there into the hallway, both of them too drained to celebrate properly. Amanda appeared with Ethan's phone. You left this in the conference room, and you have 17 missed calls from a neighbor. Ethan's heart stopped. He grabbed the phone and called back immediately. Ethan, where are you? Mia called me crying. She said you've been gone for hours and she's scared. He checked the time. 3 hours. He'd left his 7-year-old daughter alone for 3 hours. I'm coming home right now. He ran for the elevator. Victoria followed him. What's wrong? I left Mia alone. I thought this would take an hour, but go. I'll call you later. Ethan drove home breaking every traffic law in existence. He burst into the apartment to find Mia sitting on the couch, face red from crying, the neighbor sitting beside her. Baby, I'm so sorry. Mia launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and crying harder. You said an hour. It's been forever. I know. I'm sorry. I had to help Miss Victoria, and it took longer than I thought. I thought something happened to you. Nothing happened. I'm right here. The neighbor stood up. She's okay. Just scared. Next time maybe call if you're going to be late. There won't be a next time. After the neighbor left, Ethan held Mia until she stopped crying. Then he made her hot chocolate and let her pick the movie for the evening, even though it was the same one she always picked. Dad? Yeah? Did you help Miss Victoria? Yeah, I think we did. Good, because she needs people who don't give up on her. Ethan looked at his daughter, this 7-year-old person who somehow understood human nature better than most adults. You're right, she does. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan's phone buzzed. The board voted to extend my contract as CEO for another 2 years, pending the investigation results, but still, 2 years. That's amazing. It's because of you, the documents you found. You saved my job. We saved your job. There was a pause. Then, when this is really over, when the investigation clears us and things calm down, I'd like to take you and Mia to dinner, as a thank you. Just as a thank you? Maybe not just that. Ethan smiled at his phone like an idiot. We'd like that. Good, it's a date. Eventually. Eventually. He set his phone down and leaned back on the couch, exhausted and relieved and cautiously optimistic for the first time in weeks. They'd survived. For now. And maybe, eventually, that would be enough. The investigation took another 6 weeks to fully resolve. 6 weeks of Margaret Chen interviewing witnesses, reviewing documents, and cross-referencing every claim Richard had made against the actual evidence. 6 weeks of Ethan working odd jobs to pay rent while waiting to see if his reputation would survive intact. 6 weeks of Victoria fighting to prove she deserved to keep the company her father had built. But slowly, things started shifting in their favor. The first break came when 3 former Vail Dynamics employees came forward with their own stories of reporting safety violations that were ignored under Richard's oversight. Then a whistleblower from the facilities department admitted that Derek had been ordered to minimize documented problems to keep repair costs down. The evidence piled up until even Richard's lawyers couldn't spin it anymore. On a Tuesday morning in late November, Margaret Chen released her final report. No evidence of fraud. No evidence of fabrication. Extensive evidence that Victoria Vail had inherited a systemic safety crisis and had taken appropriate action to address it. Recommendation that Richard Vail be removed from the board for his role in creating and concealing the violations. The board voted unanimously to accept the recommendations. Richard resigned that afternoon, issued a statement about pursuing other opportunities, disappeared from Seattle within a week. Victoria called Ethan with the news. He was at Mia's school for a parent-teacher conference, sitting in a plastic chair that was too small for him while Mrs. Patterson talked about Mia's improved behavior since returning from suspension. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. I'm sorry, he told Mrs. Patterson. I need to check this. He stepped into the hallway and saw 17 texts from Victoria, each one progressively more excited and incoherent. The last one just said, "We won." Ethan called her back. Tell me everything. Victoria's voice was breathless. Richard's gone. The investigation cleared us completely. The board voted to implement all the safety recommendations from your audit, and they approved funding for a permanent safety oversight position, which I'd like you to consider applying for. A permanent position? Full-time. Benefits? Actual job security. You'd report directly to me, but work independently to ensure compliance across all Veil Dynamics properties. Ethan leaned against the wall, trying to process what she was saying. That's a real job. That's what I just said. I fix elevators. I don't do corporate oversight. You've been doing corporate oversight for the last 3 months, and you're good at it. So yes, you do. Ethan heard something in her voice. Relief, yes, but also something more personal, something that acknowledged they'd survived something together that had nearly destroyed them both. Can I think about it? He asked. Take as long as you need, but Ethan, yeah? Thank you. For everything, for not giving up, for finding those documents, for being the one person I could trust when everyone else was trying to tear me down. You would have done the same for me. I'd like to think so, but I'm not sure I'm that brave. You're braver than you think. Victoria was quiet for a moment. That dinner I mentioned, the one with you and Mia, I'd still like to do that. If you're interested. We're interested. Good. Because I owe your daughter approximately 7 ice cream cones, and I always pay my debts. Eat. They hung up. Ethan stood in the school hallway feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate kind that was just fear dressed up in optimistic language. The actual belief that things might work out. He went back to the conference and apologized to Mrs. Patterson, who gave him a knowing look. Good news, I hope? Yeah, really good news. Mia was waiting outside the classroom when the conference ended. She grabbed his hand and looked up at him expectantly. Mrs. Patterson said, I'm doing better. She did. She's very proud of you. Did you get good news too? You look happy. Miss Victoria's job is safe, and she wants to take us to dinner to celebrate. Mia's face lit up. Can I wear my fancy dress? You can wear whatever you want. And can I order dessert? We'll see. That means yes. That means we'll see. Mia grinned and swung their joined hands as they walked to the truck. For the first time in weeks, she looked like a kid who wasn't carrying adult worries. Ethan felt some of the tension in his chest finally release. They went home and Mia immediately started planning her outfit for a dinner that hadn't even been scheduled yet. Ethan let her, enjoying the normalcy of watching his daughter obsess over whether her purple dress or her blue one was fancier. His phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Mr. Ryder, this is James Mitchell from Cascade Elevator Systems. I heard about the Veil Dynamics investigation being resolved in your favor. I was wondering if you'd be interested in discussing employment opportunities with us. Me. It was the first of 7 calls he'd received that week. Contractors who'd stayed silent during the investigation suddenly wanted to hire him now that his name was cleared. Ethan politely declined most of them, but it felt good to be wanted again. Victoria called that evening to schedule the dinner for Saturday. Some restaurant Ethan had never heard of that probably required reservations months in advance. He almost suggested somewhere more casual, then realized this was important to her. She wanted to celebrate properly, to acknowledge that they'd survived something most people wouldn't have. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Ethan helped Mia into her purple dress, the one with sparkles that made her feel like a princess. He put on the one suit he owned, the same one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral 4 years ago. It still fit, but barely. They drove downtown as the sun set, painting the city gold and orange. Mia pressed her face against the window, watching the buildings get taller. Is Miss Victoria's restaurant in the sky? No, baby, just on a high floor. Wow. Diamo. That's almost the same thing. The restaurant was on the 45th floor of a building 3 blocks from Veil Dynamics headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows. White tablecloths. The kind of place where Ethan felt immediately out of place despite the suit. Victoria was already there, sitting at a table by the window. She stood up when she saw them, wearing a dark blue dress that made her look elegant and human at the same time. You came, she said. You invited us. Mia ran forward and hugged Victoria without hesitation. Victoria looked surprised for a moment, then hugged her back, something soft crossing her face. You look beautiful, Victoria told Mia. I know. Dad said I could wear my fancy dress. It's very fancy. They sat down. Mia immediately started asking questions about everything on the table, from the folded napkins to the multiple forks to the little butter-shaped like flowers. Victoria answered each question seriously, like she was explaining important corporate strategy instead of dinner etiquette. So the small fork is for salad, and the big fork is for the main food? Exactly. What if I just use one fork for everything? Then you're being efficient. I approve of efficiency. Mia looked at Ethan triumphantly. See? Miss Victoria says I'm efficient. Miss Victoria is encouraging your chaos, Ethan said. Victoria smiled. Someone has to. The meal was surreal. Ethan kept expecting to wake up and find himself back in his apartment eating reheated pasta and wondering how he was going to pay next month's rent. Instead, he was in a restaurant that cost more per meal than he used to make in a week, sitting across from Victoria Vale, watching his daughter charm a billionaire CEO like they'd been friends forever. Halfway through dinner, Mia turned to Victoria with the bluntness only children possess. Are you going to be my dad's girlfriend? Ethan nearly choked on his water. Victoria's eyes went wide. Mia, Ethan managed. That's not an appropriate question. Why not? You like her. She likes you. That's how it works. It's more complicated than that. Mia looked at Victoria. Is it complicated? Victoria glanced at Ethan, something vulnerable and honest in her expression. A little bit, but not in a bad way. So you do like my dad? I do. And you want to spend time with us? Very much. Then it's not that complicated. Mia went back to her pasta like she'd just solved a major corporate merger. Ethan and Victoria stared at each other across the table. He saw amusement in her eyes, and nervousness, and something that looked like permission to acknowledge what they'd both been avoiding for weeks. She's not wrong, Victoria said quietly. She's 7. 7-year-olds are often right about important things. Are you saying... I'm saying I'd like to try. Whatever this is, if you want to. Ethan looked at his daughter, who was completely absorbed in her dinner and seemingly unaware she'd just changed the trajectory of his life. He thought about Sarah, who'd been gone for 4 years but still occupied space in his heart. He wondered what she'd think about Victoria, about him trying again, about Mia having someone else in her life who might become important. He thought Sarah would have approved. She'd never wanted him to be alone, had made him promise, in those final weeks, that he'd keep living after she was gone. Yeah, he said finally. I want to. But Victoria's smile was tentative but real. This is probably going to be messy. Everything worth doing is messy. What if we screw it up? Then we screw it up, but at least we tried. They finished dinner. Mia ordered chocolate cake and ate half before declaring herself too full to continue. Victoria boxed up the remainder and insisted Mia take it home. They walked out of the restaurant together, Mia between them, holding both their hands and talking about how she was going to tell everyone at school that she ate dinner in the sky. Outside, the city was cold and bright. Victoria's car was waiting, but she dismissed the driver. I'll walk for a bit. You sure? Ethan asked. I'm sure. They walked together through downtown Seattle, Mia skipping ahead and then running back, full of energy despite the late hour. Victoria and Ethan talked about nothing important, about the weather, about Mia's school, about whether the Thai place that delivered to Vale Dynamics was actually any good or just conveniently located. It felt normal, like they were just two people who liked each other, figuring out how to exist in the same space without the weight of corporate investigations and safety violations crushing them. When they reached Ethan's truck, Mia was starting to fade. He picked her up and she rested her head on his shoulder, eyes already closing. Thank you for dinner, he told Victoria. Thank you for coming. And for everything else. We survived. We did. Victoria stepped closer. For a moment, Ethan thought she might kiss him. Instead, she reached up and touched his face gently, her hand cold from the night air. I'm glad you didn't take Richard's deal. I'm glad you didn't expect me to. See you Monday? See you Monday. He loaded Mia into the truck and drove home, watching Victoria get smaller in the rear-view mirror until she disappeared around a corner. Mia stirred as they pulled into their apartment complex. Dad? Yeah, baby? I like Miss Victoria. I know you do. She's not Mom, but that's okay. Nobody's going to be Mom. Ethan's throat tightened. You're right, nobody is. But Miss Victoria is nice. And she makes you smile. And I think Mom would want you to smile. He carried Mia upstairs and tucked her into bed, her words echoing in his head. She was right. Sarah would have wanted him to smile, would have wanted him to keep living instead of just surviving. Monday morning, Ethan went back to Vale Dynamics headquarters, not as a contractor in crisis mode, as someone considering a permanent position. He met with Victoria and her executive team, discussed responsibilities and expectations, reviewed the offer letter that would change his life. The salary was more than comfortable. The benefits were comprehensive. The work was meaningful. It was everything he'd needed and hadn't believed existed. "I'll take it," he said. Victoria's smile was professional, but her eyes were warm. "Good, because I already told the board you were accepting, and it would have been really awkward if you'd said no. You were that confident. I was that hopeful." Ethan started the new position 2 weeks later, spent his days coordinating safety inspections, reviewing maintenance protocols, and making sure the systemic failures that had nearly killed Victoria never happened again. It was challenging work, important work, the kind that mattered, and slowly, carefully, he and Victoria figured out how to be more than just colleagues. It wasn't easy. They were both stubborn and damaged and carrying weight from their pasts. Victoria worked too much. Ethan was overprotective of Mia. They argued about priorities and boundaries and whether it was appropriate for the head of safety oversight to date the CEO. But they showed up, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to quit. 3 months after the investigation closed, Victoria came to dinner at Ethan's apartment. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and Mia's ongoing commentary about everything happening at school. Victoria sat at their tiny kitchen table like she belonged there, laughing at Mia's stories and helping wash dishes afterward. "Your apartment is small," Mia observed. "Mia," Ethan warned. "I'm just saying, Miss Victoria's house is probably really big." Victoria crouched down to Mia's level. "My house is big, but it's also really empty. I like your apartment better." "Because we're here?" "Because you're here." 6 months after that, Victoria asked if Ethan and Mia wanted to move into her penthouse. Not because the apartment was too small, but because she was tired of being alone in a space that was too big. Ethan said yes on the condition that Mia got to keep her stuffed elephant and her purple sparkly dress and everything else that made her feel at home. They moved in on a Saturday. Mia immediately claimed the guest room with the window overlooking downtown and declared it the best room she'd ever had. Victoria bought her a fish tank for her birthday. Ethan installed safety railings on the balcony and taught Victoria how to make grilled cheese that didn't burn. It wasn't perfect. Mia struggled initially with having another adult in her space. Victoria had never lived with a child before and sometimes forgot that 7-year-olds needed structure in bedtimes. Ethan worked too many hours trying to prove he deserved his position. But they figured it out, made compromises, built something that looked like a family even though it didn't start that way. A year after the investigation ended, Victoria took Ethan back to the building where they'd first met. The executive elevator had been completely rebuilt. State-of-the-art safety systems, regular maintenance schedule, every violation corrected. They stood in the lobby where Victoria had walked 42 flights of stairs to make a board meeting that would determine her future. "I got fired here," Ethan said. "Best thing that ever happened to you." "That's what I told you a year ago." "Were you lying?" Ethan thought about it. About everything that had happened since that night. The investigation, the media scrutiny, the moments when everything felt like it was falling apart, the slow rebuilding, the gradual realization that he'd somehow stumbled into a life better than anything he'd planned. "No," he said. "I wasn't lying." Victoria took his hand. "I never thanked you properly for saving my life that night." "You thanked me multiple times." "I thanked you for pulling me out of an elevator. I didn't thank you for everything that came after, for standing beside me when everyone else was trying to tear me down, for believing I was worth fighting for when I wasn't sure I believed it myself." "You were always worth fighting for." "I know that now, because you showed me, cheat." They stood there in the empty lobby, holding hands like two people who'd survived something that should have destroyed them. Ethan thought about where he'd been a year ago, barely scraping by, terrified of failing Mia, convinced his life would never be more than emergency repair calls and past due bills. He'd been wrong, not because everything had worked out perfectly. It hadn't. There were still hard days and difficult conversations and moments when he wondered if he was doing any of this right. But he wasn't alone anymore. Neither was Victoria. And Mia had gone from a kid carrying adult worries to a kid who laughed more than she cried. That was worth something. Maybe worth everything. They left the building and drove home. Home. Ethan still wasn't completely used to calling Victoria's penthouse home, but Mia had adjusted faster than both of them. She was waiting when they got back, watching a movie with her fish tank bubbling in the background. "Did you see the old elevator?" she asked. "We did." "Is it fixed now?" "Completely fixed." "Good, because I don't want you saving people from broken elevators anymore. It's too scary." Set skis. Ethan sat down beside her. "What if someone needs help?" Mia thought about it seriously. "Then you can help them, but you have to come home after." "Deal." Victoria joined them on the couch. They finished the movie together, Mia between them, the city lights spread out below. It was an ordinary evening, the kind that didn't feel significant while it was happening. But later, Ethan would remember this moment as the one where he finally stopped waiting for everything to fall apart, where he accepted that maybe, sometimes, people who'd lost everything could build something new from the pieces. The next morning, Ethan woke up early. Victoria was still asleep beside him, her face peaceful in the gray dawn light. He got up quietly and made coffee, stood by the window, watching the city wake up. His phone buzzed. An email from Margaret Chen. He almost didn't open it, didn't want to revisit that period of their lives. But curiosity won. "Mr. Ryder, I wanted to reach out now that enough time has passed for reflection. Your testimony during the Veil Dynamics investigation was some of the most honest and straightforward I've encountered in 20 years of conducting corporate audits. You stood by your findings despite significant pressure to recant or soften them. That integrity is rare. I'm retiring next year and I've been asked to recommend someone to train as my replacement. I'd like to recommend you. The position would involve investigating corporate safety violations across multiple industries. If you're interested, please let me know. Respectfully, Margaret Chen. Ethan read the email twice. A year ago, he would have immediately said yes, would have seized the opportunity without hesitation because opportunities were rare and he couldn't afford to refuse them. But now he had a job he liked, a family he loved, a life that worked. He didn't need to chase every opportunity that came his way. He could choose the ones that fit the life he'd built. He wrote back thanking Margaret for thinking of him, but explaining he was happy where he was. It felt good to turn down something not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Victoria found him by the window an hour later, coffee cup empty, watching commuters start their day 40 floors below. "You're up early?" "Couldn't sleep." "Bad dreams?" "Good thoughts." She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head against his back. They stood like that for a while, not talking, just existing together. "I have a board meeting today," she said eventually. "I know. I'm not nervous anymore about them questioning my decisions or doubting my leadership." "Good, you shouldn't be. It's because of you. You gave me the confidence to trust myself." "Yeah." Ethan turned around to face her. "You always had that confidence. You just forgot it for a while." "Maybe, but you reminded me." Mia wandered out of her room, still half asleep. Mia wandered, dragging her stuffed elephant. She climbed onto the couch and Victoria brought her a glass of orange juice. They sat together while Mia woke up slowly, talking about what she wanted to do at school that day. This was Ethan's life now. Morning coffee with a woman he loved. A daughter who felt secure enough to be silly and loud and herself. A job that mattered. A future that didn't feel like a constant fight for survival. He thought about Sarah sometimes, wondered what she'd think about all this, about Victoria, about the life he'd built from the wreckage of the one they'd shared. He thought she'd approve. She'd always wanted him to be happy, to give Mia a full life instead of one defined by loss. Later that morning, Ethan went to work, reviewed safety reports, coordinated with building managers, made sure the systems that protected thousands of people every day were functioning properly. It was important work, the kind that didn't get headlines or recognition, the kind that only mattered when something went wrong and it prevented disaster. But Ethan had learned that the most important things were often the ones nobody noticed. The quiet acts of showing up, the daily choice to keep fighting even when you were exhausted. The decision to tell the truth even when lying would be easier. Those were the things that built actual lives. Not the dramatic moments, The ordinary ones. At lunch, Victoria texted him a photo of Mia's latest drawing. Stick figures labeled Dad, Victoria, and Mia standing in front of a building with an elevator that had a giant X through it. The caption read, "No more broken elevators." Ethan smiled and saved the photo. No more broken elevators. At least not the kind they couldn't fix. That evening, the three of them had dinner together. Nothing fancy, just tacos and the ongoing conversation about whether Mia was old enough to get a pet rabbit. She argued her case passionately. Victoria secretly agreed with her but pretended to need convincing. Ethan played the responsible adult and suggested they wait until summer. After dinner, Mia practiced reading while Victoria worked on her laptop and Ethan reviewed maintenance schedules. It was domestic and ordinary and exactly what Ethan had been searching for without realizing it. Around 9, Mia's teacher called. There was a school project coming up where students had to interview someone they admired about their job. Mia had chosen Victoria. "She wants to interview me," Victoria asked, looking genuinely surprised. "Apparently you're her hero." "I'm nobody's hero. You're hers." Victoria's eyes got bright. She blinked quickly and looked away. "Okay, tell her teacher I'll do it." The interview happened the following week. Victoria sat with Mia at the kitchen table, answering questions about running a company and making hard decisions, and what it was like being in charge of thousands of people. "Were you ever scared?" Mia asked. "All the time." "But you did it anyway?" "I did it anyway." "Why?" Victoria thought carefully about her answer. "Because some things are worth being scared for. And because I had people who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." "Like my dad?" "Exactly like your dad." Mia wrote this down in careful 7-year-old handwriting. Then she looked up. "You love him, don't you?" The question hung in the air. Ethan, who'd been pretending not to listen from the living room, went completely still. Victoria didn't hesitate. "Yes, I do." "And you love me too?" "Very much." "Good. Because we love you too." It was matter of fact, declarative, the way children stated truths adults spent years dancing around. That night, after Mia was asleep, Victoria found Ethan on the balcony. He was staring at the city, thinking about how different his life looked from up here compared to the view from his old apartment. "Mia asked me if I loved you, Victoria," Victoria said. "I heard. I told her the truth." "I heard that too." "Is that okay?" Ethan pulled her close. "Yeah, it's okay. I should have told you first. You're telling me now." Victoria rested her head against his chest. "I love you, and I love Mia, and I know we didn't plan any of this, but I'm grateful it happened anyway." "Me too." They stood together in the cold November air, the same month they'd survived the investigation a year earlier. Everything had changed since then. They'd both almost lost everything, but they'd held on, kept fighting, kept showing up even when it would have been easier to quit. And somewhere in that fighting, they'd found each other. Ethan thought about the night he'd pulled Victoria out of that broken elevator, how he'd been just trying to do his job, how he'd had no idea that saving her life would end up saving his own. Sometimes the people who rescue you are the ones you meet during your worst moment. When everything's falling apart and you can't see a way forward, when you're trapped and scared and running out of time, those are the people who see you at your most vulnerable and choose to help anyway, who don't judge you for breaking, who understand that surviving sometimes requires someone else's strength, borrowed until you find your own again. Victoria had needed Ethan's honesty when everyone else was lying to her, his stubbornness when she wanted to give up, his belief that doing the right thing mattered even when it cost everything. And Ethan had needed Victoria's courage, her refusal to accept that being afraid meant being defeated, her example that you could lose almost everything and still fight to protect what remained. They'd saved each other. Not in one dramatic moment, but in 100 small ones. Every day they showed up. Every conversation where they told the truth instead of what was easy. Every choice to keep trying when giving up would have been simpler. That's what building a life actually looked like. Not perfect moments or happy endings tied up neatly, but imperfect people choosing each other repeatedly, showing up for the hard days, making space for each other's damage while building something new from the wreckage. A month later, Ethan took Victoria and Mia back to the park, where they'd eaten ice cream. It was December now, cold enough that their breath misted in the air. But the sun was out, and Mia wanted to play on the equipment that had become her favorite. While Mia climbed and ran and shouted about seeing everything backwards from the monkey bars, Ethan and Victoria sat on the bench where they'd first admitted they were more than just colleagues surviving a crisis together. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if that elevator hadn't failed?" Victoria asked. "Sometimes. We never would have met. Probably not. Mom, my uncle would have removed me as CEO within months, and you'd still be doing emergency repair calls. Maybe. Don't you think that's strange? That the worst night of our lives ended up being the best thing that could have happened?" Ethan watched Mia hang upside down, her face red, her smile enormous. "I think we made it the best thing. The elevator braking was just the elevator braking. What we did afterward, that's what mattered." Victoria leaned against his shoulder. "You're annoyingly wise sometimes. I've had practice surviving things I didn't think I could survive." They sat in comfortable silence until Mia ran over, breathless and cold. "Can we get ice cream again?" "It's December, done," Ethan said. "Ice cream is timeless, Dad. Miss Victoria said so." Victoria laughed. "She's right, I did say that. You're enabling her chaos. Someone has to." They walked to the same ice cream shop. Mia ordered the same flavor. They sat at the same table, but everything else was different. A year ago, they'd been three people trying to survive separate disasters. Now they were a family, imperfect and still figuring things out. But together, Ethan looked at his daughter eating ice cream and making Victoria laugh with her stories about second grade. Looked at Victoria, who transformed from the terrified woman trapped in a broken elevator to someone who smiled easily and often. Looked at the life they'd built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. This was enough. More than enough. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. There would be more hard days, more challenges, more moments when things felt like they were falling apart, but they'd face those moments together. Three people who'd learned that being broken didn't mean being defeated, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that sometimes the families you built were stronger than the ones you were born into. The single father who couldn't afford to fail had failed anyway. Lost his job. Nearly lost everything. And in that failure, he'd found something better than what he'd lost. The CEO, who everyone expected to collapse, had collapsed, had her competence questioned and her leadership challenged, and her entire world nearly destroyed. And in that collapse, she'd discovered she was stronger than anyone knew. The 7-year-old girl who'd watched her father struggle had learned that struggling didn't mean giving up. Together, they'd built something that mattered. Not a corporation or a career or anything that would make headlines. Just a life. An ordinary, imperfect, beautiful life. And that was worth more than any elevator Ethan had ever fixed.